Hey everybody, this is Sven from Manticore Arms. You've probably all heard about this new arm brace ATF proposal that's come out, and what I wanted to do here was go through really quick on what you can do to fight against it. There's actually some really easy steps, and then after I've done that, I actually want to go through kind of point by point what they've put down on paper, what they're saying, the problems with it. I mean, the obvious problems. None of us really like the ATF here and how they seem to be at odds with our industry. But I want to go through all of that and just kind of lay this out because I haven't seen anywhere where it's really been gone through point by point to explain what's going on, what the concerns are, and what the effect to maybe the end user if you've got an arm brace is. So I'm going to cover all that, and we'll just get going here. It may take a little while to go through all of this. But if you've got at least just a few minutes, I'll go through the highlights of it and tell you what you can do right now in the next couple of days to take care of this. So what we're discussing right now is the Department of Justice, ATF, and in parentheses, objective factors for classification of weapons with stabilizing braces. If you see me looking down, I've got a reference sheet here because there's a lot to go through. So in short, this will redefine arm braces as making any weapon with it on it potentially an illegal SBR. And that would mean potentially, and it may not be everybody, but potentially all 4 to 6 million current owners of arm braces could be a felon. And we can get into the details a little more later on that. But the important part here is this document that's been put up is on the Federal Register right now. And the Federal Register is a website where they put proposals up that you can comment on. And that's the important part here, is that they have a 14-day review period for you to make comments on it. Now, the period started on December 18th. Right now, as I'm recording on the evening, it's December 20th. We've got till January 4th to make comments. I would obviously recommend going earlier than that, just in case the website goes down, anything happens like that. But it's very, very easy to comment. So what you can do is you can go to www.federalregister.gov/letter D as in Delta, another /2020-27857. That's the document number. It'll take you straight to the document. And I'll put a link in that below so you can find that. You can click on it and go there directly. But I did want to just spell it out the easy way so you can see it. If you don't have time to look at the links, you can at least locate it yourself. If you look on the left side of the screen, there's some icons. One of them is, they look like little cartoon text bubbles, like you'd see a cartoon character talking in. One of those, if you click on it, it's to leave a comment. What you want to do is include that case number in it, the 2020-27857. It's basically the title that you put in there, and then you put your comments in it. When you leave your comments, don't scream about burning the government down. Don't do any of that. That's not going to do any good. Comments are curated for profanity, things like that. We want your comment to count. You want to be polite. Don't curse. Don't make threats. State why it is bad. That's the important part. And if you can make a solid logical argument, that's far more valuable than the emotion pouring out. Believe me, I was on a Gun Funny podcast earlier today and realized I felt like I was on a soapbox yelling about this because it makes me so angry. But I'm trying to keep it under control here so we can really go through the points. So the quick points, if you're going to make anything, you can choose from any or all of these. But the first one is, the document doesn't give any real guidance. It's just a document saying they're going to give guidance. They don't actually give the guidance they say. As of right now, the document just says, and we'll get into more, but it'll define by caliber or by length or by weight what is a pistol and what's an illegal SBR if it's got an arm brace on it. Except they don't list any of that. So how are you supposed to know? It doesn't limit the ATF in any way. It doesn't make them make the hard determination, or rather it lets them make the determination. They use the word holistically, which is kind of a scary word when it comes to government, because they basically can say, well, any combination of factors mixed up like cookie dough. Sometimes will come out good, sometimes will be bad, but we're really not going to define what they are. You have to put it in yourself to them to determine if it's good or bad. And what it really does is forces the manufacturer or consumer to submit and get it back, and you get told yes or no. And you may not even know why it got approved or not approved. Basically, this holistic approach, they're putting out the document to say they're giving guidance. What they're really doing is putting out a document to say we're going to give guidance, but we're not going to tell you what the guidance is. And it just opens the door for unlimited ruling later. They can keep changing it, kind of like they've done here for the last 8 years with arm braces back and forth. That's not how the rule of law is supposed to work. This document allows them to force you through threat of law, threat of rule, to either register your gun as an SBR, because they don't actually give any qualifications on what would make it an SBR or not, or if it's just a pistol. But they say, hey, we're gonna waive the $200 tax, except that they're pistols. The ATF said they're pistols, so that's not very fair. There's no knowing what guns with an arm brace are safe or not safe. There's no way to know. You may think, hey, I'm fine, whatever, but they've literally given no definition of it. They don't give a hard weight. They don't give a hard length. They don't give any of these things that would help you determine yourself which good law should, if you're breaking the law or not. I think more to the point here too, another good point is this basically violates the rule of law. We have a principle in our legal system called ex post facto. It comes down to, if you do something and later it's made into a crime, you can't be charged for it if it wasn't a crime at the time. And the best example I can give is if your local county highway department puts up a sign that says speed limit 65 miles an hour, and there's a camera there to make sure everybody's driving 65 miles an hour, right? You're driving 65 miles an hour. Maybe you're driving 55. Doesn't matter. You're not breaking the speed limit. You're not breaking the law that was posted. If 8 years later they come back and then change that sign to 45 and say, well, speed limit now is 45, but everybody who drove 65 in the last 8 years was breaking the law. That's exactly what the ATF is doing right now, is they're saying, well, you bought this gun. We said it was okay in 2012, and you maybe bought it in 2014, but it's 2020, and we're going to say it's actually an illegal SBR, and you can't do that. It doesn't work that way in our legal system. We're not a banana republic, or at least I hope we aren't at this point, and you cannot do that. It's a good faith thing. You have faith that when the law is created, that's what the law is, that's what you're working with. How else can you, go about your day and know you're not breaking the law? This is creating 4 to 6 million felons for what purpose? Are these people committing crimes? No. I mean, that's the whole purpose of the NFA, is to prevent weapons, we'll get into a little more, but basically to prevent weapons of potential danger to the public. There's some specific wording to it, from being in the hands of people without a higher level of care or registration. No, I don't agree with the NFA. It is what it is in the laws. We, keep fighting it. We'll hopefully get rid of it someday. But, with what it is right now, at least we understand what that loss is, and there's a baseline there. Basically this is carte blanche, or blank check, if you want the term, for the ATF to determine whatever they want. And if they can do that now, where they can retroactively do it, what's to say they won't change it later? What's to say they won't start determining anything as an SBR or, some other NFA weapon to their whims? There's been a lot of that happening actually in the last week or two here, with the ATF kind of running amok with what they're doing, trying to round stuff up, and it's very scary. At the end of the day, it's not holistic. They're saying they'll do a holistic review. It's subjective. It's an I know it when I see it attitude, and that's not acceptable by the rule of law. That you cannot have it that you go before a judge and They say you did something, and you say, well, I didn't break the law. Well, in my eyes, I think you did. You're going to go to jail now. That's not how a good legal system that we supposedly have in the United States works. These are, and for you to even get a pistol, you've got to be not a felon. So where's the crime that's being committed other than you're now making people felons who didn't do anything? Anyhow, those are the points I would make. If you think anything else, please let us know. I'm happy to add to this. We're happy to discuss this more. And I think now I'm going to go through the document in detail. If you don't have the time to stick around right now, totally understand. It's a lot of diving into some legal stuff, some wording, some executive orders. But if you really want to understand the meat and potatoes of what's going on here and these points that were made, the why of it all, kind of the thrust of what it appears the ATF is doing, I'm going to go through this, and I guess right now let's dive right in. So let's talk about the history of the arm brace. Back in 2012, Alex Bosco of SB Tactical, he's probably the most well-known with the arm brace. He was the first guy to get an approval for it. He had a licensed arm brace, the SIG SB15. He had made an agreement with SIG. I'm not quite sure of the timing on this, if he got his arm brace approved first or SIG got it, worked with him and then they got it approved. But anyhow, the ATF, their exact words were, "We find that the device is not designed or intended to fire a weapon from the shoulder. Based on our evaluation, FTB," that's the technical branch, firearms technical branch, "finds that the submitted forearm brace, when attached to a firearm, does not convert the weapon to be fired from the shoulder and would not alter the classification of a pistol or other firearm." So what they're saying there is, if it's got an arm brace on it, it's still a pistol. In 2015, the ATF actually went back on that ruling and said shouldering an arm brace changes the configuration of the weapon. And I'm paraphrasing that. I couldn't find the exact text. Actually, finding a lot of this information is very hard. A lot of it seems to maybe have been deleted from the ATF website. Their letters, you got to search the internet a lot. So, but I do know that case fairly well. Basically, what they were saying was, you have an AR pistol, you put an arm brace on it. If you're shooting it with your hand extended, it's a pistol. If you put that arm brace against your shoulder, it's now configured as a rifle, probably with a less than 16-inch barrel, and now it's a short-barreled rifle. Well, legally, and this one got pretty eaten up fast. I mean, it took about 2 years for the ATF to give up on it, but what it came down to is a weapon can't change configuration simply by how the end user holds it or operates it. That'd be like saying you take your Colt 1911 or your Glock or your CZ75 and you hold it up against your shoulder and suddenly you've got an illegal SBR. It's rather ridiculous. It also gets into, just a whole legal Pandora's box of how do you define the firearm then? You define the firearm by how the end user operates it? Doesn't make any sense at all, nor is it legally enforceable, nor is it any way you can document it. Anyhow, moving on, in 2017, there finally was a reversal of that decision because of the obviousness. I believe the courts started to get involved a bit, and definitely there was legal involved in this on both sides of the argument. The ATF said, an NFA firearm has not necessarily been made when the device is not reconfigured for use as a shoulder stock, even if the attached firearm happens to be fired from the shoulder. To the extent that the January 2015 open letter, which is the one that they did in 2015, implied or has been construed to hold that incidental, sporadic, or situational use, and that's in parentheses, of an arm brace in its original approved configuration, equipped firearm from a firing position at or near the shoulder was sufficient to constitute, quote, redesign. Such interpretations are incorrect and not consistent with ATF's interpretations of the statute or manner in which it has historically been enforced. In other words, what ATF said is, yeah, we were wrong. You can't change the configuration of a firearm simply by how you hold it. And I think we all agree that's reasonable for once. Then we get in 2020 here, SB Tactical, basically the ATF did what I would consider a smear campaign. It was a rather horrible thing to do, especially for a government agency. They said that SB Tactical had released braces onto the market without approval. Well, yes and no. See, the part of the story that they're not telling is in 2016, well, the whole time the arm brace has been out, SB Tactical, and I'm using SB Tactical as an example because I know them. We actually do work with them. Just full disclosure, I do have an interest in what happens here. Our company, Manticore Arms, does a lot of the mounting block design, things like that. Just so if somebody says, hey, what's this guy Sven from Manticore Arms, what's his stake in this? It's kind of a big stake, and that's why I wanted to make this video, because I think it's important to go over all of this to really break it down. The ATF released a letter, basically said they had put out arm braces without approval. Well, SB Tactical had been sending in every model of arm brace for approval and had actually been told by the ATF that they didn't need to do that anymore. They're all the same model of brace, just variants on the same thing. They're the rubber with the Velcro. They don't need to keep submitting them. ATF, my understanding of it is ATF was kind of tired of constantly saying, yes, it's fine, and told them to stop submitting them. Well, then here we are in 2020, 4 years later, change in who's in charge of the ATF, and they say, yeah, put out a letter and says, well, you weren't submitting them, you're basically fooling your end users into thinking it's a product that can, and you're saying it can be used in their marketing. They're implying that SB Tactical's marketing is saying that it's to be used as a shoulder stock. I've talked to Alex directly about this at SB Tactical. He said, find any piece of marketing we've ever done that suggests it should be shouldered. They don't put it out there because they know that's not the intent. I mean, that's, kind of where the letter goes here. So that's kind of where it stands with the history of the arm brace. I think what you can sum up with it is ATF approved it. They don't like how some end users may be using it, but they've caught themselves in a legal pickle where they approved something with no guidelines or definition, and now they're trying to rein things in post facto, after the fact, and now they're just trying to get an open-ended document so they can basically wrangle up all this stuff and put it under their thumb again. I think this is possibly, my personal take on this, and my personal take on this is a lot of it is a maybe a bit of vindictive thing to get back at how they maybe view that they screwed up when it got approved, and they want to punish all the people who've, letter of the law versus spirit of law, and maybe their tech branch didn't understand really what they were approving when they did it, or maybe how some end users would use it. At the end of the day, though, that doesn't make it an illegal product. It's okay. So let's get to the Department of Justice letter, all the components of it. Now, it's a 13-page letter. I'm going to take what I think are the most important parts of it, break that down a bit, and discuss what I think of each of these things. Once again, my personal opinion. This is not SB Tactical's opinion. This is not anybody else's. This is just how I've gone through it over the last few days to understand what the ATF is claiming versus what I personally know, what I know, I'm not a lawyer, but what I know about law and my understanding of, how things function, what's going on here. So let's start with, on page 6 of this document, there's a big summary at the beginning and everything, but when you get into the document, page 6, they state, as the purpose of the NFA is to, quote, regulate certain weapons likely to be used for criminal purposes. So I thought that was an interesting point. So what they're implying is that all these guns that they say are not pistols but are actually illegal SBRs, they're implying, because they want them on the NFA, that these are being used in criminal purposes. I found one case in 8 years where it was used. So yes, there is one case. In Dayton, Ohio last year, there was an AR-15 used by someone for a shooting, actually used it, against other people, killed somebody, killed a couple of people actually, and the barrel was less than 16 inches. It had a blade. It may have been a shockwave. It doesn't really matter who made it, but there's an arm brace on it. And that was used in the crime. As far as other crimes, we're not talking about somebody had an arm brace, they're dealing drugs, and they get busted because they're a felon that can't own a gun. If you can't own a gun, you can't own a pistol that can take an arm brace, even if it doesn't have one. That's the way the law works. So on that assumption, if you can't own the gun, it doesn't really count. And quite honestly, I couldn't find any other cases where that was the issue. In fact, there's been at least one case where a guy had an arm brace on it, was charged with illegal SBR. I believe it was in Kentucky in the last year or two, and it got dropped because it's not. There's precedent that it's not an SBR by the law. So there's no proof from statistical information besides this one single use that a pistol-braced firearm is a weapon likely to be used in criminal purposes. There's nothing to say that this guy in Dayton who decided to go on a rampage, that if pistol braces weren't available, that he wouldn't have just got a pistol without one, or that he would have just gotten a 16-inch barreled firearm. There's the brace itself did not create the crime, nor did it really assist in it. Like, it's not that the guy couldn't commit the crime without it. The point being there. The point, though, however, is criminal purposes. Well, the ATF, by trying to say these are SBRs, is immediately turning 4 to 6 million people who are not felons, and we know they're not felons because they own pistols. You can't own a firearm if you're a felon. They're trying to turn them into instant felons with the carrot and the stick of, well, we'll let you register it as SBR. So we move on to page 1, the summary, and page 7 on this document. And I'm only referencing this in case you want to pull up the document yourself. Feel free to read through it. If you see something else of interest in it that kind of sticks out, let me know. Happy to go through it. Maybe we can do a Facebook live stream at some point if people want to discuss some things, get a little more into it. I'm happy to share that information and work with other people. Maybe we can learn some more about what's going on in this. So anyhow, they say, upon issuance of final guidance, ATF will provide additional information to aid persons and companies in complying with federal law and regulations. So what they're saying right in the document is this isn't even the guide on how to do it. This is just a document saying they're going to issue a guide how to do it. On page 9, the Firearms Technology Division, FATD, examines each weapon holistically on a case-by-case basis. How can you have law that's holistic, that you got to put all the pieces together? Basically what they're saying is, we'll know it when we see it, but we're not going to tell you till we see it if we know if it's legal or not. And to get a little more into this, so the categories that they're talking about are, they'll decide based on caliber, type, weight, length of pull, materials that the arm brace is made of, potentially sights that are on it if they're appropriate to a pistol, but they don't list anything. So what you get into is, maybe you've got an arm brace that has Magpul sights on it, and maybe they decide, well, you can't use those when it's at arm's length, and so that's not a pistol. But maybe you have an Aimpoint Micro on it, and they say that's okay, or maybe they say that isn't okay, or maybe they say a Trijicon RMR isn't okay, but for some reason a Trijicon RMR is okay for competition shooters using Glocks and CZ75s, because we know that's been done. You get into this weird rabbit hole of, there are so many factors and components out there, there's no way to ever know if your gun's legal or not. Say you buy one and the manufacturer sells it without sights, but the ATF won't tell you what sights are okay for it. So you go put some sights on it. Well, what if Magpul brand is approved, but Command Arms is not? What if it's an off-brand that's a knockoff of Magpul sights, which we all know exist? Well, if that's not on their list, which doesn't exist at all, actually, because they don't even say that, you've suddenly got this multifaceted gazillion things that there's no way for you to ever know. And the end user shouldn't be responsible for, you should be able to know if you're in the bounds of the law or not. How can you do that if they won't even qualify it in this document? They say they'll release it later. Well, what if they change their mind on it later? Or what if with this open-ended thing they say, well, no calibers are approved? Oh, okay, well then they've just dumped everything into the SBR category right away. So you can kind of see where it goes here, that they're saying they're going to issue guidance. They're saying this document's for guidance, but then the document says, well, we're going to issue guidance once it's approved. It's basically asking for approval of a law that doesn't exist yet without you being able to read it. It's the old healthcare bill. Well, we have to pass it so we know what's in it. As you can see, it makes me a little unhappy on that. It's just not right. So, and then we get into the Firearms and Technology Division, FATD is what they refer to them as, examines each weapon holistically on a case-by-case basis. A firearm voluntarily submitted to FTISB, Firearms Technology Industry Services Branch, is assigned to a firearms enforcement officer who evaluates the firearm. So what you have is an agent gets the firearm and then plays with it. I mean, literally, this is what it says in the document. If you get a little deeper into it, they fire it. They decide if you can hold it at arm's length. And what they say is, well, another FEO, another firearms enforcement officer, will also review it to avoid subjective bias. And then the chief of the FISTB will have to approve it. But you still get into it where if this is so holistic they can't put it on paper, it's inherently subjective. It's impossible for, let's say you get the FEO, the firearms enforcement officer, two guys submit the same gun, and one of you, are made by two different brands. It's the same configuration, 9mm, whatever magazine, Colt magazine, Glock magazine, we'll say. They're both Glock magazine fed, both the same weight, everything. And you get the ex-linebacker officer who's 300 pounds, 6'5", and he goes to shoot it and says, yeah, it's fine. And then the 110-pound ATF officer who reviews it can't hold it up because she's too small, and she goes, well, this doesn't work. Or the big guy can't strap it around his ham-sized, forearm, says, well, this is no good. Because there's no defined regulation, it's still based on human subjectivity in this. And what could happen is you could get two people who review the same gun on the same day, or more likely, two guns of basically the same configuration, and one will get approved and one won't. And I'll bet you money, too, based on how the ATF has done things here, and this is my personal opinion, they're not going to tell you what they liked and didn't like. They'll just say not approved. For those of you familiar with Q, that's actually what's happened to them with their gun. They said, well, what do we need to change? And the ATF literally said, well, we'll know it when we see it. Just keep submitting it till we tell you it's okay. So basically, they've left them open-ended, and I guarantee this is just to push this into the whole market that way. So let's get down to the carrot and the stick here. On page 12, this is part of the document, ATF understands that most individuals who acquired affected stabilizer-equipped firearms did so in good faith reliance on representations made by those selling the stabilizer braces of the firearms, and those firearms were not subject to the NFA. Basically what they're saying here is, well, it's on the reseller who sold it saying it was okay. No, it's on the ATF saying in 2012 it was okay. It's not on the consumer, it's not on the consumer. It's not on the manufacturer reseller saying it was okay. Manufacturers, designers like me, like SB Tactical, all the other companies involved in this market, in the firearms industry, we go by the guidance of what the ATF says. If the ATF says something is okay, we have to go on good faith that it's okay. We don't get to make up the rules. We don't like the rules sometimes. We think they're stupid sometimes or contradictory. That being said, just like you, we don't want to go to jail. We're doing our best to comply with the law. and trying to pass the buck that it's the industry's fault that an end user is now possibly in possession of an illegal SBR. Well, that's just the ATF trying to pass blame. That's the ATF trying to pass off that it's not their fault. When I think we all agree, if you change the rules of the game midway through the game, is it the fault of the other team, or is it the fault, of the guy who changed the rules? So basically, the ATF and DOJ in this document say that anybody who has a pistol brake-equipped firearm will be allowed to get a tax stamp for it for free. You'll basically be able to turn it into an NFA weapon without the $200 charge. Sounds great, right? I mean, except for the fact that now you have an NFA weapon and maybe you didn't want to get into those. Maybe the fact you live in a state where you can't register as an SBR. Here in Illinois, we have a 26-inch minimum length. So even if the gun could be registered as SBR, if it measured less than 26 inches, you still can't register it as an SBR. It's not legal in our state. States like New Jersey or some of the other ones that just simply won't allow you to have an SBR. Well, what do? Now you're in possession of a weapon that's illegal by state law, not just by federal law. So, it continues to build in the trouble it creates. So you've made all these people felons now because you've redefined it, or the ATF has redefined it. And I mean, it gets into, like I've said a few minutes ago, and I kind of skipped ahead. If the ATF will only say it's okay if you put it in for a holistic review, does that mean does that mean not just companies put it in? And I don't think they've even thought about this. Individuals, like you buy a gun and you're not going to put an accessory on it or change up the fore end or the muzzle device or whatever. I mean, that's just the way the market is. Or if you're a manufacturer, you want to put a new muzzle device on, does that mean I have to resubmit it? Does the ATF has the resources to do this? Do they even understand the Herculean task they're creating for themselves here? I mean, I'm sure none of us really care about that, but the doorway they're opening here is ridiculous for them to be able to even rule on this. I mean, we think suppressors are bad right now for getting approval, on your Form 1 or whatever. Imagine if every single time something changed on a gun, you as a consumer have to get the permission of the Crown from the ATF. Is it okay if I put these sights on? They're going to be flooded with people asking for letters. And I know people say, hey, don't write the ATF, you're just going to make it worse. The reason people write the ATF is because it's so damn confusing. Nobody knows what is okay and what isn't. The ATFs create this rabbit's warren of weirdness that nobody can follow anymore. And that's really, the people writing letters, all of this is a symptom of an agency that kind of hasn't really done a good job of monitoring themselves or understanding what their job is, which is to regulate our industry. If I can get on a side here, I've never seen an agency, a regulatory agency, that's so at odds with the people that it works with. It actively wants to damage and destroy our industry. I think the best example I could make, it'd be like if the alcohol enforcement division of the ATF was all teetotalers. It doesn't make any sense. You can't have people who actively want to destroy what they're supposed to keep an eye on. I get why the ATF exists, at least in theory. It's to make sure there's a paper trail for guns. Love it or hate it, that's the point of it. Okay. But if you're going to run off here and just try and attack everybody and make rules that nobody can follow and then put people in jail for it, I mean, how can anybody in good conscience do that? I don't understand. And that really gets down to the craziness of the last point. So we mentioned that, or I mentioned that this document literally can put people in jail. And then they have the gall to put in here the contents, and I'm not joking about this. This is literally in the document. I didn't mark the page, but it's in the last couple of pages. The contents of this document do not have the force and effect of law and are not meant to bind the public in any way. And you're probably all thinking, oh, so nothing's going to happen with this. No, what that actually is a direct jab at Executive Order 13891. This is basically the ATF writing language into their own bill that has the force of law because it can put you in jail and saying, yeah, we can put people in jail, but we're following Executive Order 13891. And you're probably all sitting here thinking, oh, I'm not familiar with that one. You should be, because this is really important. So October 2019, this was written and put out there by Trump specifically because of things like what the ATF is doing. Executive Order 13891 is promoting the rule of law through improved agency guidance documents. It's a little bit long, but it's important for me to read through this, just like all of this is. So the document says, the executive order says, departments and agencies in the executive branch adopt regulations that impose legally binding requirements on the public, even though in our constitutional democracy, only Congress is vested with the legislative power. The Administrative Procedure Act, APA, generally requires agencies in exercising that solemn responsibility to engage in notice and comment rulemaking to the public, to provide public notice of proposed regulations under Section 553 of Title V United States Code, allow interested parties an opportunity to comment, and consider and respond to significant comments and publish final regulations in the Federal Register. That's part one. Now you notice the legally binding requirements in that first statement. It's really important because we get to part two of the agencies may clarify existing obligations through non-binding guidance documents which the APA exempts from the notice and comment requirements. Yet agencies have sometimes used this authority inappropriately in attempts to regulate the public without following the rulemaking procedures of the APA. Even when accompanied by a disclaimer that is non-binding, a guidance document issued by an agency may carry the implicit threat of enforcement action if the regulated public does not comply. Moreover, the public frequently has insufficient notice of guidance documents which are not always published in the Federal Register or distributed in all regulated parties. Now, if you've been paying attention, all of that's really freaking important. One last part here, and then we'll cover this. So the final portion is, Americans deserve an open and fair regulatory process that imposes new obligations on the public only when consistent with applicable law and after an agency follows appropriate procedures. Therefore, it is the policy of the executive branch, to the extent consistent with applicable law, to require that agencies treat guidance documents as non-binding, both in law and in practice, except as incorporated into a contract, take public input into account when appropriate in formulating guidance documents, and make guidance documents readily available to the public. Agencies may impose legally binding requirements on the public only through regulations and on parties on a case-by-case basis through educations, and only after appropriate process, except as authorized by law or as incorporated into a contract. So you'll notice, as I mentioned before, the ATF says it does not have to bind the public in any way. What they're basically saying is, the first section there that I read off of the executive order, and pardon me as I just scroll down here, there's a lot of text to look through on the pages. Got a pile here. Basically, what they're saying is, well, we know that this document can have legal repercussions on people. It could send people to jail. So this document doesn't actually count as non-binding. That's literally what they're saying here, except that it does because it can put people in jail. So they're basically doing exactly what the Section 2, which actually Section 3 here, they're basically, and this is my understanding of, I'm not a lawyer, but they're basically saying, well, we understand that this causes, legally binding requirements on people, can put them in jail, but this document doesn't actually count as that because that's what we say. BS? That's what I'm going to go with on this. You can't just say something isn't. You can't say you can't say a scoop of strawberry ice cream is chocolate and it's just chocolate. No, it's still strawberry. You're just calling it the wrong thing to get around, calling it what it actually is. that to me is the most egregious thing in here, is they literally had the balls to put in here that, well, we're going to let the public comment. And another point there, normally 60 days on the Federal Register to do comments. This time, 14. Don't know why. I mean, I know why. I think we all know why. They don't want comments. But they're trying to get away with the minimum while they still don't straight out break the executive order, which they kind of did, in my understanding. When it says, even when a disclaimer is non-binding, a guidance document is issued, may carry the implicit threat of enforcement, and not give you notice. They're basically trying to cover up their own work. So what's the fallout of all this? We've been through what the document says. We've been through the history of the arm brace. So as part of the people who've been involved in, a subcontractor for the arm brace, design of components of it, part of the industry that's involved around it, I can say there have been, it's not just us. It's not just, the public that's concerned about this. Obviously the industry is, and things are happening behind the scenes. There's a lot of work being done to address what is being done here. I can't go into details. Quite honestly, you don't hold your playbook up right in front of your opponent, when things are going on. I don't want to say who's meeting or what's going on, but I want to give an idea of what we've found. So apparently the ATF said there'd be a $100 million impact on the industry, and that it would only affect accessory manufacturers. I can tell you that's absolutely not true, because for 8 years, a good chunk of the industry has based their manufacturing, their product design, their future R&D on the understanding that arm braces were legal. You get into a spot where, a good portion of my company is based on arm brace technology, not just for SB Tactical, but we do design work for other firearms companies with models that, are going to have arm braces because they're legal. They're being put together and everything's fine with them until this comes out and, if it gets through. So the understanding, there was a group of us who met on one of the various conference calls I've been on in the last few days. The estimated value of damage to the industry, just adding up the dozen to 2 dozen people who are companies that were involved in this call, was $1 to $2 billion a year of damage to the industry. Probably looking at least 1,000 jobs. People are a little more skittish talking about the actual number of employees they might have to let go, things like that. But definitely an impact, and that's direct impact. That's firearms company, that's accessory manufacturers, that's just them. That's not talking about second tier operations, and by that I mean machine shops, molding shops, other subcontractors who do work for those companies either on this product or other products. If one of these companies involved directly goes out of business, then all the downstream people who maybe do work for them lose that business. Just adding up the numbers, when that thing came out on Friday and one of the conference calls we had on Saturday, yesterday, $50 to $60 million in lost and canceled sales in one day. That's in one day. The ATF, just by the threat of this document, did 50% of the damage they said would be done in the entire industry forever. And it's only going to get worse, I'm pretty sure. I mean, I don't blame anybody who doesn't want to buy an arm brace right now, or is really concerned. I get it. I mean, I'm there too, when you suddenly this is put out that, oh, maybe you'll be a felon. I get it if you want to hold off and kind of see what happens. That's why it's important to make your opinion heard, because I don't want anybody to be a felon. None of the companies involved in this process want their end users to be potentially in trouble over this. None of us would have got into this if we did this. We're firearms lovers too. And we're just trying to live our life, do our things, make our money, make a good product, and, keep it together and do what's legal under U.S. code. We don't want to see the 4 to 6 million people suddenly become instant SBR owners and all the fallout of that. And sure, will the ATF go charge every single guy they find with it? No. But maybe you get pulled over in a car and they don't like you, or something else. You know, you break another law and they add it as a tag on, and suddenly you've got not just a misdemeanor, but they throw a 10-year in jail felony on you because you have an illegal SBR. Don't think anybody wants that. And so that's why I say it's really important to get involved here. We can make a difference. So if you're concerned here, you're thinking, gosh, ATF's not going to read my comment. Nobody cares, right? It's not true, because we have precedent that it has worked before. So some of you may remember and some may not. In 2015, the ATF put out a very similar kind of document on the Federal Register for comment, where they were going to take M855 green tip ammunition, 5.56 and declare armor piercing. It has a steel core put in it due to manufacturing processes, weight, the shape of the bullet, and everything like that. But they were going to rule it was armor piercing. There was a huge uproar, and hundreds of thousands of people commented on this, and boom, it went away. So if you think you can't make a difference, that's not true. You can. It actually works. I know it feels unlikely that you can actually just be one voice, and one voice helps. More voices help. But you can make a comment on this on the Federal Register. You know, go to the federalregister.gov/D/2020-27857. Put a link below. Make a comment on it. You can also email your congressmen and your senators. There are people involved in this at that level. Your senators, congressmen, some of them actually shot back at the ATF to ask about arm brace rulings. And this was about a month ago. 16 of them got on board, wrote a letter. The ATF said, give us all the public documents you've shown people on arm braces. Also give us all the private stuff you've had as internal communication, because they're aware the ATF makes up secret regulations, things like the 13.5-inch length of pole that everybody bandies about, but you can't find it written down anywhere in public, can't find it in private, because they don't want to write it down, because as soon as it's codified, then they know every arm brace will be under that length, and you know, they say, well, crap, now what do I do? You know, what do? Now they got to come up with some holistic garbage so they can prevent it from happening. And that's the point here. It's holistic garbage. None of this is real. How they're going to do it is just meant to obfuscate. It's like counting soap bubbles so you're allowed to vote. It's meant to be a carnival game that you can never win. That's what this is being set up for, and that's why it's important. And it's not just important for arm braces, but do you want an agency, one agency, or more agencies? Because what if other agencies in the new administration or any administration see this and go, oh, well, we can just issue rules and tell people what to do, and they have no recourse, and it doesn't matter, and we can leave it open-ended. Now's the time to kind of knock this down. Now's the time to knock this down, prevent it from happening. So please go comment on the Federal Register. You've got till January 4th. Go and do it today when you see this right now. 2 minutes. Even if you just have time to say, I don't agree with this. This is not the rule of law. I don't agree with this. I'm an arm brace owner. Why am I becoming a felon, over something that no crime has really been committed over? It's not a danger to the public. You could remove every pistol brace off one of these pistols. They're still firearms. They still have serial numbers. It's not like it's some hidden class of weapon that all sorts of banditos are running around with and doing things with. They're just guns, and it doesn't hurt anything. It's not hurting anybody. And that's the point. Why restrict something? Why make something illegal if it's not doing any harm? What's the point? So I'm Sven from Manticore Arms. I thank you for listening to this very long video. I hope this answered some of your questions. I hope my point of view helps you understand it better. And once again, if you have comments, please comment below. If you want to send us an email at info@manticorearms if you want to know what's going on, if you want to hear more about this, if you want to hear about anything in the future, regarding firearms law, I'm happy to go through it. Once again, not a lawyer. I'm a former architect who got into gun design, who loves guns, who loves the industry, loves the people in the industry, loves meeting people, and I just want to see the right thing done here. I want to see the rule of law maintained, and real law, not kangaroo court law where you can go to jail because they won't ever tell you what you're actually doing wrong. Everybody has the right to know where the line is, at the very least, you know. Regardless of your political affiliation, I think we can all agree that you should be able to know what is okay and not okay, and not left in this nebulous situation where you can go to jail and not even understand why. So thank you for listening, and appreciate your time.